Eddie Hearn says that Canelo Alvarez told him that he would like to fight Artur Beterbiev once he's got through Caleb Plant and become undisputed champion 168. Claims he's had a look at Beterbiev and, yeah, feels like he can take him. Now, I've been very impressed by Canelo Alvarez. I give him a lot of credit for beating the likes of Sergey Kovalev. I know there's a lot of people out there who didn't want to give him credit. They said that Sergey Kovalev threw the fight, took a dive, all this kind of stuff, which I don't believe. Was Sergey Kovalev in his prime, at his peak, when Canelo Alvarez beat him? Of course not. He'd been knocked out, and in his previous fight was nearly knocked out again by Anthony Yarde in that 8th round. So he was definitely shop-worn by the time Canelo got to him, but it was still very impressive, considering the fact that Canelo turned pro. I know he was like 15 when he turned pro, but he turned pro at what, 140, 147 pounds? By the time he was in his 20s, he was like light middleweight. And then up into his late 20s, I'm not sure what age he was when he fought Kovalev, but yeah, he's knocking people out at 175. And a guy who was an incumbent world champion. He just come off a title defense against Anthony Yarde, who, okay, Anthony Yarde was not a proven world level fighter, but he's still a big, strong, athletic, light heavyweight. And Sergey Kovalev was able to come through a very tough patch and get the stoppage. And also, prior to that, he avenged his defeat. Third defeat it would have been, wasn't it? Because he lost to Andre Ward first time, although it was controversial. Then he lost second time by stoppage. Then his third defeat was to Alida Alvarez, and that was by stoppage, right? So he came back from that third pro defeat and defeated Alida Alvarez very impressively in the rematch, boxed his head off over 12 rounds. And after that, he went into the Yarde fight. So, yeah, he was a bit shop-worn and he wasn't quite what he used to be, but he was still a very good light heavyweight, still a world-class fighter when Canelo Alvarez beat him. So I was very impressed by that. But beating Artur Beterbiev would be another step up again, as far as I'm concerned. That would be far more impressive, to me anyway, than his victory over Sergey Kovalev. Because, of course, Artur Beterbiev hasn't taken beatings like Sergey Kovalev took. He hasn't been stopped. Yeah, he's had a couple rocky moments. We all remember the Callum Johnson fight. But he hasn't taken the punishment of Sergey Kovalev. He hasn't really shown the kind of vulnerability. Yeah, he went down against Johnson, as I say, but to me, Kovalev has shown a lot more vulnerability. Kovalev was down early in his career against Darnell Boone, and there still isn't any footage from that first Boone fight. And I wonder why, because apparently, according to Darnell Boone himself, Kovalev was down, I think, once officially, but Boone claims he was down several times unofficially. And they did run it back and Sergey Kovalev managed to get the win. And in fact, I think when Kovalev fought Boone the second time, that was not long after he'd signed to Kathy Duver, and Duver wanted him to fight Boone again to see whether he'd improved enough, to see whether it was worth sticking with Sergey Kovalev in the long run. Because if you can't get, I guess her thinking was, if you can't get past a guy like Darnell Boone comfortably, then I'm not sure where we can go. But he did get past him comfortably in that second fight. But either way, the point I'm making is he was down against Darnell Boone. We know Boone is one of these journeymen who hits way harder than his record suggests. He knocked out Stevenson, put Andre Ward on the floor. But either way, Kovalev showed vulnerability there. And of course, against Andre Ward, was stopped in the second fight, was badly knocked out by Alida Alvarez. That was probably the most devastating defeat of his career. And very shaky against Anthony Yarde. So Beterbiev hasn't been in them kind of situations there to that extent, to that severity of being hurt. No. So to me, Beterbiev, even though he's up there in age, I don't know what he is. Is he 35, 36, Beterbiev now? He doesn't have many miles on the clock. He doesn't have a lot of professional fights. Hasn't been in a lot of wars. I think he's still very fresh. Inactivity has been a bit of a thing for Artur Beterbiev. He hasn't been the most active guy, but he fought fairly recently. And, let's see when he fights again. I'm not sure when it's scheduled. But if he was to fight Canelo Alvarez coming off the back of a fairly recent win, Beterbiev that is, and Canelo the same. So both of them having that ring sharpness, I would be tremendously impressed if Alvarez were able to win, and even more impressed if he was able to stop Artur Beterbiev. That really would be something. Because bear in mind, Beterbiev fought at cruiserweight in the amateurs at 200 pounds. He might have even fought, I don't think he fought a super heavyweight, but he fought a heavyweight, which is the equivalent of cruiserweight. Okay, heavyweight in the amateurs is 200 pounds, cruiserweight in the pro game. So, yeah, he was taking on people like Michael Hunter. Right? Beterbiev fought and beat Michael Hunter in the amateurs. And a bunch of other people, big people. Didn't he fight Alexander Usyk? I'm sure he might. I think he fought Usyk, didn't he? Artur Beterbiev. So he was fighting big guys. That's what he's used to. So for a guy as small as Canelo to be able to step up and take on a beast like Beterbiev, a guy who's that big and strong and fresh, hits hard, I mean, it would be incredibly impressive if Canelo could beat him, and just mind-blowing if he could stop him. I mean, it wouldn't be the most incredible thing I've ever seen in a boxing ring, but it would certainly be one of the most impressive things I've seen for many a year if Canelo was able to do that. So let's see how Canelo feels after the Caleb Plant fight, assuming he wins, because stranger things have happened than a Caleb Plant beating a Canelo. I know, most of us are not going to be picking Caleb Plant, but either way, it's boxing and you just never know. Sometimes, I say sometimes, most of the time, the biggest upsets happen when a fighter is riding a crest of a wave and seems invincible. That's usually when the big upsets happen. When people start saying, there's nobody can beat him. It's a foregone conclusion, this, that, and the other. He can do anything. People start getting a little carried away with a fighter and then, bam, he loses in unexpected fashion. So, I know Canelo's a consummate professional and all that kind of stuff, but it can happen to anyone. But assuming he gets past Caleb Plant, like most of us feel he will, let's see how he feels. Let's see how easily he deals with Plant and see if he still wants to step up and take on Beterbiev. Because Eddie Hearn is apparently saying to him, look, don't you want to fight Bivol first? The inference being, well, Bivol's an in-house fight for one. And if anybody's going to beat Canelo, obviously Eddie Hearn wants it to be a guy who he signed, who's in his stable. But also, there's kind of the inference that Bivol was maybe not quite as dangerous as Beterbiev because Bivol's not as big. Bivol constantly talks about he can still make 168. Yeah? You don't hear Beterbiev talking about that, or at least not as far as I'm aware, because he's a huge light heavyweight. So the inference being Beterbiev's more of a dangerous fight. Bivol might be more of a technical fight, but Beterbiev's dangerous, But apparently Canelo says, nah, I want Beterbiev. I don't see anything particularly impressive there. To be fair, in Beterbiev's last fight, I wasn't really impressed. I thought it was a lackluster performance. But I think Beterbiev may be one of these guys who fights to the level of his opposition. Because against Gvozdyk, he was tremendously impressive. And Gvozdyk really was better than the last guy he fought. Obviously, there's an element of styles make fights in it, but you put Gvozdyk in against the last guy Beterbiev fought. I know Gvozdyk's retired now, but Gvozdyk's going to beat that guy 10 times out of 10. Yeah, and when Gvozdyk went in there against Beterbiev, Beterbiev looked magnificent. So, yeah, maybe he fights to the level of his opposition. Other people might say, actually, it's Beterbiev showing signs of age and wear and tear. I mean, it's possible, but I tend to suspect it's probably more to do with just him raising his game to the level of his opposition. So, anyway, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. The possibility of Canelo Alvarez stepping up in weight to face Artur Beterbiev. How do you think he would do? How would that fight play out? How would Canelo approach it? Would he fight on the back foot? Would he take the fight to Beterbiev? What would it look like? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.